My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because the decision someone is about to make could change the way you understand their silence, their actions, and the emotions they have been carrying quietly. Listen carefully. Sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with a private moment, a deep realization, or a choice that nobody else knows about yet. Somewhere in their heart, someone has been standing at a crossroads, thinking about the past, the present, and the future they truly want. They have been carrying thoughts they rarely share, emotions they struggle to explain, and questions that keep returning when the world becomes quiet. For a long time, they tried to convince themselves that everything was fine. They told themselves they should keep moving forward, focus on other things, and stop looking back at the memories that continued to appear in their mind. But no matter how busy life became, certain moments kept bringing them back to the same thoughts. A familiar song, a meaningful place, a simple reminder of a conversation you once shared. They realized that some feelings do not disappear just because someone tries to ignore them. Listen carefully, because this is where their inner journey begins. They started questioning the choices they had made and the path they were currently walking. They began asking themselves if they were truly happy or if they were simply comfortable with what was familiar. They wondered if they had been avoiding something important because change felt frightening. They knew that making a life-changing decision would require courage, honesty, and the willingness to step outside their comfort zone. The decision they are facing is not something they are taking lightly. They understand that every choice has consequences. They know that moving in a new direction means leaving behind old fears, old habits, and old versions of themselves. They have spent countless moments thinking about what they truly want, what truly matters, and what kind of future they want to create. Something huge is waiting for them because they are beginning to realize that staying in the same place can sometimes be just as difficult as taking a new path. They have started understanding that growth requires change. They have started understanding that protecting themselves from uncertainty can also prevent them from experiencing something meaningful. And slowly, they are finding the courage to face the questions they once avoided. There were moments when they almost made this decision before. They felt the desire to move forward, but fear stopped them. They worried about what others would think. They worried about making the wrong choice. They worried about losing something familiar. But deep inside, they knew that a life built only on fear could never bring true peace. What happened next changed everything. They began listening more closely to their own heart. They started paying attention to the feelings they had pushed aside for so long. They realized that ignoring their emotions did not make them disappear. Instead, those emotions became reminders that something needed to be understood. Stay till the end, because the biggest realization came when they understood that this decision was not only about another person. It was about themselves. It was about becoming more honest with who they are. It was about accepting what they truly value. It was about choosing a future that reflects the person they are becoming, not the person they used to be. They began reflecting on the moments that shaped them. The lessons from past experiences. The mistakes that taught them wisdom. The challenges that made them stronger. They realized that every chapter of their life prepared them for this moment. Every difficult season taught them something important about patience, forgiveness, and courage. Listen carefully, because this is the turning point. They are no longer making decisions based only on fear. They are learning to make choices based on growth and understanding. They know that the future cannot be controlled completely, but they also know that refusing to move forward can keep them trapped in the same place. The person you cannot stop thinking about may be experiencing their own battle between what is comfortable and what feels meaningful. They may be questioning old beliefs, reconsidering priorities, and trying to understand what truly brings happiness. This journey is not about a perfect answer appearing overnight. It is about a person slowly finding clarity. Something huge is waiting because every life-changing decision begins with one small moment of honesty. One moment where someone finally admits what they truly want. One moment where they stop running from difficult emotions. One moment where they choose to believe that a different future is possible. And when they finally make their choice, it will not be because everything became easy. It will be because they became stronger. They became more aware. They became ready to face whatever comes next with a clearer heart and a more open mind. My beloved child, remember this: every person reaches moments where they must decide whether to remain where they are or step into something new. Change can be frightening, but it can also be the doorway to growth. The most important decisions are often the ones that require the most courage. So the question is not only what decision they will make. The deeper question is, who will they become after making it? Because sometimes a single choice does not just change a person's situation. Sometimes it changes the entire direction of their life. And the next chapter begins when they finally stop asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and start asking, "What if something beautiful begins when I choose courage?" My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because this is the moment when the decision they have been carrying in their heart begins to become clearer. For so long, they stood between two different worlds. One side was the life they already knew, the familiar patterns, the comfortable choices, and the things they had convinced themselves they should accept. The other side was a new possibility, a path that required courage, honesty, and the willingness to admit what they truly wanted. Deep inside, they knew that something had to change, but they were waiting for the strength to finally take that first step. Listen carefully, because the battle happening inside them is deeper than anyone realizes. From the outside, they may look calm. They may appear as if everything is normal. They may continue with their daily routine, laugh with others, and carry on as if nothing is happening. But inside, there is a conversation they cannot escape. They are questioning their choices, their priorities, and the direction they want their life to take. They are asking themselves if they are truly following their heart or simply following what feels safe. For a long time, they avoided these questions because answers can be frightening. Sometimes it is easier to stay in a familiar situation than to step into the unknown. Sometimes people remain in places where they no longer feel fulfilled because change requires them to face their deepest fears. They feared making a mistake. They feared disappointing others. They feared that one decision could completely change the future they had imagined. But something began shifting inside them. They started realizing that ignoring a feeling does not make it disappear. Avoiding a choice does not mean a choice is not being made. Every day they waited was still a decision. Every moment they stayed silent was still shaping their future. And slowly, they began understanding that they needed to stop allowing fear to control their direction. Something huge was waiting for them because they started looking at their life with new eyes. They began asking different questions. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid losing everything?" they started asking, "What do I need to do to become happier and more honest?" Instead of focusing only on what could go wrong, they started thinking about what could become possible if they allowed themselves to grow. Stay till the end, because the next realization changed their entire perspective. They discovered that a life-changing decision does not always begin with a dramatic event. Sometimes it begins quietly. It begins with a thought that refuses to leave. It begins with a feeling that keeps returning. It begins with a person realizing that their heart has been trying to tell them something important for a long time. They began remembering the moments that made them feel alive. The conversations that inspired them. The people who brought out the best version of themselves. The experiences that reminded them who they truly were beneath all the expectations and responsibilities they carried. They started understanding that their happiness mattered too. Listen carefully, because this is where courage enters the story. They knew they could not predict every result. They knew there were no guarantees. But they also understood that a meaningful life cannot be built by avoiding every risk. Sometimes growth requires stepping forward even when the entire path is not visible yet. There were still moments of doubt. Moments when they questioned whether they were ready. Moments when they wanted to return to what was familiar. But each time they felt uncertain, they remembered why this decision mattered. They remembered the feeling of being stuck. They remembered the desire for something different. They remembered that their future deserved more than fear. What happened next changed everything. They began preparing themselves emotionally for the next chapter. They started letting go of old fears, old regrets, and old beliefs that no longer served them. They understood that moving forward did not mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it and carrying those lessons into something new. The decision they were preparing to make was not about proving anything to anyone. It was not about seeking approval. It was about becoming honest with themselves. It was about choosing a direction that aligned with the person they were becoming. It was about understanding that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit that they are ready for change. My beloved child, remember this: every person reaches moments where they must choose between staying comfortable and becoming stronger. The unknown can feel scary, but it can also hold opportunities that cannot be found by standing still. The future belongs to those who are willing to grow. And now, they are closer than ever to making that life-changing decision. The fear is still there, but it no longer controls them. The questions are still there, but they no longer stop them. Because deep inside, they have discovered something powerful. The moment you choose courage, your entire life begins to move in a new direction. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because this is the moment when the decision they have been quietly preparing for begins to take a clearer shape. For so long, they carried a storm of thoughts inside their heart while showing the world a calm face. They smiled, they continued their responsibilities, and they acted as if everything was normal, but deep inside they knew they were standing before an important turning point. Something inside them was asking for change, asking for honesty, and asking them to finally stop ignoring what they truly feel. Listen carefully, because this part reveals the struggle they never shared. They spent countless nights thinking about the past, the present, and the future they wanted to create. They remembered the moments that made them happy, the choices that shaped them, and the experiences that taught them valuable lessons. They started realizing that life is not only about staying where everything feels familiar. Sometimes life asks people to step forward, even when the next chapter is uncertain. For a long time, they believed waiting was the safest option. They thought if they gave themselves more time, the confusion would disappear. They thought the answers would somehow appear without them having to make a difficult choice. But as time passed, they noticed something important. The questions were still there. The feelings were still there. The desire for something different was still there. They finally understood that avoiding a decision was also a decision. Something huge was waiting for them because they began to trust their own growth. They looked back at everything they had survived and realized they were stronger than they once believed. They remembered every challenge that once felt impossible but eventually became a lesson. They remembered every moment they thought they would break but somehow found the strength to continue. Those memories reminded them that they were capable of facing change. Stay till the end, because this is where the biggest shift happens. They stopped asking whether they were ready and started asking whether they were willing. They understood that nobody feels completely prepared before making a meaningful choice. Confidence often comes after taking the first step, not before. They realized that waiting for perfect certainty could keep them waiting forever. They began imagining the future from a different perspective. They imagined waking up one day knowing they had chosen honesty instead of fear. They imagined looking back and being proud that they listened to their heart. They imagined becoming someone who did not run away from difficult moments but faced them with patience and courage. But the decision was still complicated. They knew that every new beginning requires leaving something behind. They knew that change can bring both excitement and sadness. They knew there could be questions from others and challenges along the way. Yet they also knew that remaining stuck in a place that no longer felt right could slowly take away their happiness. Listen carefully, because the next realization changed everything. They understood that a life-changing decision is not always about choosing the easiest path. Sometimes it is about choosing the path that helps you grow. Sometimes it is about choosing peace over confusion. Sometimes it is about choosing authenticity over pretending everything is fine. What happened next changed everything. They began taking small steps toward the future they wanted. They started having honest conversations with themselves. They started releasing the fears that had controlled their thoughts for so long. They started believing that they deserved a life built on truth, understanding, and emotional peace. The person you cannot stop thinking about may be facing a similar moment of reflection. They may be discovering what truly matters to them. They may be understanding that some connections, experiences, and memories have a way of changing the way people see their own lives. Not every answer arrives instantly, but every honest question brings someone closer to clarity. My beloved child, remember this: the greatest changes often begin quietly. They begin with a thought, a realization, a moment where someone finally admits that something inside them needs to change. The outside world may not notice the transformation at first, but inside, an entire new chapter can already be beginning. And now they stand closer to their decision than ever before. They are no longer the same person who was afraid to move forward. They have learned from the past, accepted the present, and started preparing for the future. The fear has not completely disappeared, but courage has become stronger. Because sometimes the most important decision a person makes is not about where they go next. It is about who they become when they finally choose to believe in themselves. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because this is the moment when the decision they have been thinking about for so long begins to transform from a quiet thought into a real possibility. For a long time, they carried this choice inside their heart without telling many people. They kept analyzing every detail, every risk, and every possible outcome. They wondered if they were strong enough to handle the changes ahead. But slowly, they started realizing that the biggest challenge was not the decision itself. The biggest challenge was finding the courage to trust themselves. Listen carefully, because this is where their heart begins to become clearer. They started looking back at the moments when they ignored their own feelings just to keep everything comfortable. They remembered the times they stayed silent when they wanted to speak. They remembered the opportunities they avoided because fear convinced them they were not ready. And now, they were beginning to understand that protecting themselves from every possibility also meant protecting themselves from growth. Something huge was waiting for them because they discovered a powerful truth. Sometimes life changes when a person finally stops waiting for everything to feel perfect. They realized that every important chapter begins with uncertainty. Nobody knows exactly what tomorrow will bring. Nobody has every answer before taking a step forward. But people who grow are often the ones who are willing to move even when the path is not completely visible. They began preparing themselves emotionally for the changes ahead. They knew that a new decision could bring new responsibilities, new conversations, and new challenges. They knew they might have to explain themselves to people who did not understand their choices. But for the first time, they were not only thinking about what others wanted. They were thinking about what was truly important for their own happiness and peace. Stay till the end, because the next realization was something they never expected. They discovered that the decision was not only about changing their circumstances. It was about changing their relationship with themselves. They started treating their own feelings with more respect. They started listening to their own voice instead of allowing fear and outside opinions to control every choice. There were moments when they felt nervous. Moments when they questioned if they were making the right move. Moments when the comfort of the old life seemed easier than the uncertainty of the new one. But every time they felt that hesitation, they remembered why they started this journey. They remembered the feeling that told them something needed to change. Listen carefully, because this is the turning point. They began separating fear from intuition. They learned that fear often speaks loudly, creating endless reasons to stay still. But inner clarity speaks quietly, reminding a person what truly matters. They started choosing the voice that brought peace instead of the voice that created panic. What happened next changed everything. They began taking small but meaningful steps. They started having conversations they had avoided. They started organizing their thoughts. They started preparing themselves for the possibility of a different future. They understood that big changes are usually created through many small moments of courage. The person you cannot stop thinking about may be experiencing a similar period of reflection. They may be reconsidering what they want, what they value, and what kind of life they want to build. Sometimes people reach moments where they realize they cannot continue living only according to expectations. They need to discover what feels honest and meaningful to them. Something huge was waiting because they finally accepted that change does not always mean losing something. Sometimes change means